but he averaged almost 20 points per game. He's clearly the best playmaker on the roster. Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're going to get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about the Orlando Magic, a team that just drafted Paolo Banchero, #1 in the NBA draft, brought in Jalen Suggs last year, #4 in the NBA draft, and has a plethora of youth throughout this team, including, but not limited to, another #1 overall pick named Markelle Fultz on their roster. This team has made a lot of moves recently in the last few years to kind of set themselves up with a super strong young core within the NBA, one of the more deep young cores within the NBA without, a ton of insane draft capital. Like, you look at teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, who just have a plethora of picks to take shots in the NBA draft. You look at a team like the Utah Jazz, who just acquired a ton of picks for Rudy Gobert. So there's plenty of teams. I mean, even the New Orleans Pelicans are a perfect example, because after trading Anthony Davis and Jrue Holiday, they ended up with a buttload of picks. And so there's plenty of teams throughout the NBA that have tons and tons of draft capital, but Orlando didn't receive quite as much. Now, they traded Vucevic and got a little bit of draft capital. They traded Aaron Gordon and got a little bit, but it's not like they got anything crazy. They didn't get 6 first-round picks for any one player, in which some of these other teams did, with the likes of a Paul George, a Rudy Gobert, or a Anthony Davis trade. So, I mean, they don't have the pick capital of some of those teams, but they've still allowed themselves to have one of the best rebuilds in the league, adding youth to this roster and continuing to try and find themselves a direction. Now, this team has a lot of guys, and they got to kind of pick some of them, whether it be Cole Anthony, whether it be RJ Barrett, whether it be Jalen Suggs, or whether it be the guy that I think at this point deserves their starting point guard spot in Markelle Fultz. They've got a lot of guys at just the point guard position, which we'll kind of get to here in a minute, and why I am so high on Markelle Fultz at this point, especially after what we've seen in his career, whether this guy forgot how to play basketball, or whether this guy was a consensus #1 overall pick. He's been all over the board, and he's only been in the league for 5 or 6 years, right? So it's something kind of crazy to think about, but we'll get into him here in a minute. I want to talk about their #1 pick, Paolo Banchero. Obviously, I made a video on him earlier in the year. It might have been actually last year, thinking about it now. But it was during last season, obviously. I am a Duke fan, so I've made that pretty clear in that video, I feel like. But I do have a little bit of a biased opinion on him. But I think, with Summer League, it showed exactly what anybody that believed Banchero was the best prospect in this draft thought, which was, look, he's NBA ready, and he can create his own shot. Now, Jabari Smith had a lot of talk for #1 and was linked to the Magic going #1 for a long time until the morning of the draft day. So they did a very good job disguising that. Not that they really needed to, but it at least created some drama. And they brought in Paolo Banchero. When you looked at a lot of mock drafts heading into the draft, it was, hey, Banchero's the best guy, but they're going to take Jabari. And obviously Jabari Smith provides a lot in his own right, being such a tall guy that can shoot so well, can play defense, doesn't quite have that shot creating ability down yet. And that's exactly what the Magic needed, was shot creation. So although Jabari had that great package of all that stuff that he can do, because he couldn't do it on his own, that was a big thing of why Banchero was viewed as the better prospect, and better for this team also. I mean, when you look at guys that can create their own shot, yeah, Cole Anthony can kind of create his own shot, and obviously, like, the guards can and stuff like that. Playmaking wise, it's not as good as you'd maybe want on this roster, although we'll kind of get into that more in a little bit. Franz Wagner, had a very solid rookie season for them last year, but you don't expect this guy to be like an all-star or anything like that. He's going to be a solid player for them, but you're not looking at Franz Wagner as like, oh, this is our franchise savior. This guy's going to be our shot creator. This guy's going to do it all for us. He had a solid year, but nothing that you're looking at like, oh my God, like, this guy is it, right? Otherwise, they would have gone with Jabari Smith, I think, if you had looked at Franz Wagner that way. They brought in Chuma Okeke before, who had some injuries to start his career. Prior to starting his career, I guess. So hopefully, he continues to kind of work that off and pave himself out a path. We've seen Jonathan Isaac be one of the best defenders in the league to being not able on the court. So we'll see what he can kind of potentially do this next season. We'll see how many minutes he gets, whether whether he starts, whether he's off the bench, whatever he's doing. Obviously a very good defender. I don't expect him to score a lot. But yeah, we'll kind of see what happens there. And then they brought back Mo Bamba this offseason. We saw him play very well with Wendell Carter last year in the front court, and somebody that, you know, kind of finally took some sort of breakout to their career, a guy that was looked at to have so much potential, and we're starting to kind of see some of that finalized. And then obviously Wendell, who I think is just, you know, we got to Orlando and just kind of unlocked something. Has turned into a pretty solid center, power forward, whatever you want to call him. He can shoot the ball a little bit, very good defensively, a very good core piece for this team, I think, going forward. You know, whether Mo Bamba can still continue to be what he was is definitely something you'll have to kind of wait and see. But Wendell, I think, is for sure going to be on this team headed into the future and is a very solid young piece for this team. Can kind of anchor the defense, can still be useful offensively. This is exactly what he was promised to be, I think. I think what he is now is what you hoped him to be when he was in the draft, and something the Chicago Bulls kind of desperately need. Not to hate on the Bulls or anything like that. Now, whether they get DeMar DeRozan without trading Wendell to get the star power of Vucevic, we never know, but they could use some Wendell on their team right now. No hate to Bulls fans, obviously. They did some stuff last year, and I think they're happy to just be back in the playoffs, which I totally understand. But yeah, I think this Magic team, we've kind of gone over a lot of the youth on this team, and they have more. So it's kind of crazy to think about how many guys on this team you kind of need to give opportunity to. It's almost on the level of OKC, but not quite, where it's like, okay, you got to pick guys. You got to pick who you're going with into the future, because there's a point in which you're going to need to kind of just go with it. Obviously, I was really high on Jalen Suggs headed into last year. He did not have the rookie season that I expected him to. I think he could have a breakout year this year, but I would try him at the 2 next to Markelle, but I would almost try and groom him into a trade asset. I think all the guards on the roster, none of them are really going to be off-ball guards that well. I think Cole Anthony, just his name, everything like that, he wants to be a star. Whether he ever encapsulates that, we'll wait and see. If he ends up being a 6-man, I think he could do that pretty well. RJ Barrett, I had a lot of hopes for. Was one of my favorite players, played on my favorite team. I was actually jumping out of the gym when we got him in the draft and everything like that. But he just hasn't reached his potential either. And then Markelle, who we're going to finally kind of get into, is a guy that, you know, he has kind of bounced around, right? He got traded to Orlando for a bag of chips and some onions on the side because he was probably crying. No, that was terrible. That was that was awful. I'm never saying that again. Yeah, anyways, he got traded there for nothing, right? He got traded there for nothing. Like, the 76ers gave stuff to get rid of him. Like, they just didn't want him on the roster anymore. Just the narrative, everything around it, they just wanted to get rid of him and move on, right? And he was a consensus number 1 pick when they traded up to draft him. He kind of forgot how to play basketball. It's something that actually, when you hear Chris Paul, who talked about this, I don't know, maybe a little while ago on JJ Redick's podcast, but he talked about how he kind of wasn't able to shoot the ball in the playoffs against the Lakers a couple years ago. And something that's interesting about that is it seems very similar to what happened to Markelle, where they just couldn't. So whatever that was, or whatever it is, it doesn't seem like he actually was the only one that had that happen to him. We saw that happen to Chris Paul, and I'm sure you could go back in history and maybe you would find some other players now that we've kind of have a pattern or something more to look at to kind of figure that out. But Markelle has turned things around. Obviously, he got injured last season, and I think Orlando is hoping to see a breakout year from him, especially adding Paolo Banchero next to him. But he averaged almost 20 points per game. He's clearly the best playmaker on the roster. He has a mid-range game, which is exactly what was hoped and promised with him heading into the NBA. And there's just a finesse to his game that I think we're going to finally see. You know, maybe he never is a 27-point per game scorer, but there's an absolute way that he could average 22 to 24, be the main scorer on this team as Banchero enters his rookie year, and maybe averages 18 or something like that next to him, be the primary playmaker, be able to run a lot of pick and rolls with a lot of the, like I said, they got a lot of big guys. I didn't even mention Mo Wagner, but Mo Wagner can, you know, pick and pop. Mo Bamba can pick and pop or pick and roll. Wendell can pick and pop or pick and roll. Banchero you can run some pick and pop with. So there's a lot of pick and roll that I think you can use with Markelle Fultz. Obviously, the best and most utilized play in all of basketball. There's a reason that the pick and roll is what you're taught when you're 5 years old, and there's a reason that you see the best players in the league constantly running pick and rolls, right? It works, it's proven, it is the most successful thing that you can do. So if you can operate that well, you can be a good player in this league. Some guys I forgot to mention that aren't young on this team that I did just kind of think about is Terrence Ross and Gary Harris. They brought back Gary Harris. Continue to try and keep some veteran presence and maybe try and push themselves into a play-in position. Obviously, you want to give your youth experience. And as you've stacked up a lot of youth, getting a top 5 pick, wonderful getting a top 5 pick, but at a point you got to go with what you have and just go from there, right? And get those guys to their fullest potential without hovering around waiting to find somebody that just enters the league as a LeBron James, because that's just a little bit naive to think that you're just gonna get a LeBron James, right? It's just gonna fall to you. If you just sit there and hover around, it'll happen, right? It is a little bit naive. And so I think the way the Magic are doing it is super smart. I think it's similar to the way the Pistons are doing it. So if you guys didn't see my Pistons video from a few days ago, I did talk a lot about how I think the Pistons could do very similar stuff, and kind of went in depth on the roster, looking at a lot of moves that they made. So make sure you guys go check that out if you haven't seen that already. Well, I guess I am promoting. Make sure you guys drop a like and subscribe for more. I would really appreciate it. And it does help the channel out a ton, especially if you drop a like. That helps the channel out a ton. It pushes it to more people, and it motivates me to make more content. Honestly, when I see that you guys are enjoying it, I just want to make more of it, right? It's kind of a compounding cycle. But regardless, back to Orlando, right? Markelle Fultz, I think, can definitely operate the pick and roll with a plethora of guys and create a lot of things. Having the veteran presence on this team should help this team throughout the season to kind of get through some of those lulls that they could definitely see. We'll probably see Franz Wagner hit a sophomore slump at some point. But he does provide something interesting to this team that's different than a lot of the other stuff they have on this team, so that's nice. I think he compared next to Banchero fairly well. I do think Banchero provides a lot of defensive potential, so we'll see how that works. His defense next to Bamba and Isaac, Wendell, that's a very intriguing. Gary Harris is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. There's a lot of intriguing lineups on this team, so I'm interested to see how they run things. Obviously, like I said, I think two-guard wise, Terrence Ross and Gary Harris are really your only off-ball guard guys on this team that are the best at that. Now I think Terrence Ross is best as a spark plug off the bench, and I think Gary Harris works well in that starting role, although his offense isn't what it used to be when he did have a season where he averaged almost 20 points per game, in which he went from an all-offense player to an all-defense player. One of the craziest shifts in skill sets that I've ever seen. But yeah, there's a lot of intrigue on this team. I think finding a true that's your number 2 would be something I would like to see this team do, whether it be through trade or whether it be through the draft. I definitely think the trade market could be open for something like that as we kind of see things go on. But I think Markelle, Banchero, a little bit of Wendell, whoever else kind of pushes themselves out of the pack of young players. I think Wagner's in there as well, kind of as a role player. So whatever other guy can push themselves out of that pack, if you can have somebody truly off the bench, maybe you try and capitalize on some Terrence Ross, some Gary Harris trade assets, and some of these other young guys as you get to the trade deadline, as I think they will be players at the trade deadline. They will be sellers. It would be super smart by their GM to do so. Jonathan Isaac move makes a ton of sense. Maybe you start him early in the year just to do that, or maybe you slowly ramp him up and then get him into a starting role just so that you're able to flip him as a high value asset to another team that needs a high value defender. Or maybe he's such a good defender that you end up keeping him and maybe his injuries kind of fade away, which obviously you hope to see. You don't hope to see people get injured in this league. You want to see everybody fulfill their potential. Is it completely realistic? Not entirely, but it is something to root for. And so it's kind of just wait and see, right? That's why you watch the NBA. But I do think this team should be players, should be sellers at the trade deadline, even if they are trying to get that experience and make a play-in and everything like that. Or even in a case of being a seller of young assets, you can be a buyer, right? You can go get one guy that's going to help you and get rid of some of the the depth and the youth that you have to target that guy and improve your roster, in which you can be buyers and absolutely push. But I don't want to see this team go trade for a 28-year-old, star that decides that they want out, or a team starts blowing it up or something like that. Like, if this team goes out and trades for a 25-year-old guy, or like, say Jaylen Brown, say the Celtics fall apart or something like that, and Jaylen Brown somehow ends up on the market, and this team went and got Jaylen Brown. Only reason I bring up Jaylen Brown is because the Celtics video I just made, I recorded it right before this, so that was on top of my mind. I don't think that makes any sense for the Celtics, but say that Jaylen Brown became available, or somebody of that caliber, where it's like a 25-year-old guy that can play off ball and stuff like that. That would be perfect. You go target that if you're going to be a buyer. But what you don't do is go target a Bradley Beal, a guy that's like 28, because he's going to be on a long-term contract with a no-trade clause. Who knows if he even goes there? You could frustrate your young players in doing so, and although I think he gets you to the playoffs definitely with this team, whether it be this year or next year, it doesn't seem like the right gamble to me, because you're going to have to be dealing with that contract as you head into needing to pay more of your young players. Now a lot of them being on longer term contracts, in a Markelle Fultz, a Jonathan Isaac, a Wendell Carter, a Mo Bamba. All these guys are on, they're off their rookie contract and stuff like that. So you know, if you have the money to do so and you're able to go get a Bradley Beal, yeah, okay, but like, what are you going to do in 3 years when this guy is, he's like 30 now, when he's 33, and maybe he starts regressing, and Banchero wants a new contract, and Markelle then needs a new contract at that point, and you can't trade Bradley Beal because he's on the books for $50 million, but he's only averaging 15 at that point, right? So I don't want you to go do that, because that potentially detriments the future of your organization while helping you now. It doesn't help you enough now that it's worth it. So if this team is buyers, I want them to go in a direction of a young star and really push a lot of assets for that if they're going to do that. But other than that, I think you can sell. I think you can use some of those assets to retool and potentially make a move for a guy, not a Bradley Beal at that point, but something similar, where in a few years a guy maybe becomes disgruntled, he's heading into his prime, or he's in the middle of his prime, you see your guys getting older, and then you go get somebody, and that would make more sense to me. It's a little bit different than what we saw Minnesota do, where they're, waiting for Anthony Edwards to break out, but they go and get an established guy that in a couple years is probably going to be a bad contract for them. So don't jump the gun too early, as maybe Minnesota might have, but just wait it out and do it at the perfect time, right? Playing, when you're playing the GM job in the NBA, I said this before, I'll say it again, it's kind of like playing chess. It's playing chess that's never ending and keeps getting harder, right? Because more and more young players keep getting added to the league, to have more and more guys that could potentially be stars, more and more guys that can potentially be busts, and every single organization wants to win the championship every single year, right? So you're always fighting for your place. And so playing the long game, waiting for what works, is a smart option. Obviously, you don't want to overdo that in a situation in which you waste all these guys' young talent, and you end up right back where you were. But you have such a good core right now that you can really take an opportunity to try and get them experience, head into the future, and try and really build something. So yeah, this team super interests me. I think we could potentially see Markelle make an all-star team at some point. I don't see him being like a 5-time all-star or something like that, but if he makes 1 or 2 all-star teams, I definitely see it in the realm of possibility. I think Banchero is going to be a superstar in this league as a shot creator, as I think he shows defensive potential. He's a big enough guy that he's going to be able to body some guys up in the post, on the three-point line. He can do it all. So he definitely can be a superstar in this league. And when you've got your number one, it's all about building around him. And I think they already have some complementary pieces which will work very, very well next to him. So I'm super intrigued to see what the Magic are able to do. Let me know what you guys think they're going to be able to do this year. Let me know if you think Markelle can be that for them. Is Jalen Suggs the better option? I was so high on Jalen Suggs heading into the draft after watching him in March Madness. That I couldn't believe really how much he kind of flopped this last year. I would love to see him kind of break out, and who knows, maybe Markelle could be a perfect asset to go get you something to head into the future next to guys like Jalen Suggs and Paolo Banchero, because Jalen Suggs has only been in the league for 1 year, and it is not time to give up on him. He has a ton of potential left, and he could definitely unlock something for this team if he can kind of unlock his own potential, right? So let me know what you guys think. Who do you think of the 4 or 5 guards they should kind of try and build next to Banchero with. Yeah, what do you guys think Banchero is going to do this year? Do you guys think that he could win Rookie of the Year? I know it's not always the best idea to say like the number 1 pick is going to be the Rookie of the Year, because you're always going to have that surprise guy down the board a little bit that just, he gets the opportunity, pops off on his team. We've seen it year in and year out, whether it be a Tyrese Halliburton or whoever else. There's always a guy, I mean, even Eric Paschall, right? There's always a guy his rookie season that just gets the opportunity and makes the most of it and puts himself in that conversation to win Rookie of the Year. So I wouldn't guarantee that it's going to be Banchero, but I do think he is going to finish top 3 in Rookie of the Year voting and going to make a case for it. My predicted stat line for him in his rookie year would be like 18, like 6 boards and like 3 or 4 assists a game. Is kind of what I'd like to see. I guess that's what I'd like to see. He could easily average just 15 points per game, like 4 rebounds and 2 assists. And I would call that a success as a rookie year, as he kind of tries to adapt. Now, it would be a little bit of a disappointment, but it would still be a success as a rookie year. And I think if he does kind of average close to that 20-point mark, can maybe get a steal per game as well, that would be very, very promising and could push the Magic to a play-in spot where they try and get some of these guys some experience and maybe make a playoffs. Right? Who knows? I think Orlando and Detroit are definitely prime candidates to do something similar to what we saw Memphis do, where they got a lot of young talent and their main guy just was able to take them over the top and get them into the playoffs and then start kind of doing things. And one of these teams is going to be the Memphis of the East, right? One of these teams, I think, has definitely put themselves in that position. Who knows? Maybe it's both. We did see Memphis and Minnesota both make it in the West this year. Who knows? In 2 years, we could see Orlando and Detroit there. And it would be such a swing from where they were just a few years ago. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think down below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Drop a like, subscribe for more. It's been your boy Dom, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.